on his initiative, as the others had ceased to function. On Eichmann rests the direct responsibility for the operations of these fearful camps set up for the implementation of the final solution. In a few of them, a last effort was made to extort a work and labor force from the Jews before sending them to their destruction. The court will permit me to describe briefly what occurred in these places, all of which were set up by the SS, while the exterminations were conducted by the RSHA. The Majdanek camp near Lublin was established in 1941. At first, prisoners of war were detained here, but later Jews began to arrive from Czechoslovakia, France and Greece, and the camp grew. It contained separate units called fields, Felder. In the spring of 1942, gas extermination installations were constructed, as well as 2 ovens to burn the bodies. In the summer of the same year, Polish Jews began to arrive in large numbers. In the spring of 1943, the Jewish deportees from Warsaw arrived at Majdanek, and immediately the killings were speeded up, reaching a climax in November when, in one day, 18,000 Jews were shot. Conditions in the camp, even without taking into account the installations for direct executions, were so arranged that the prisoner was bound to perish, whether from hunger, disease, or pure physical exhaustion. The food provided was about 1/3 of the necessary minimum. The clothing left the prisoner exposed to the mercies of the elements. Quarters were drafty huts, each housing 500 people or more, 2 to a mattress. The work in which the prisoners were employed until being killed was in itself a means of extermination, designed to destroy the body. The same purpose was pursued by cruelty and beating during work and the employment of men in labors having no possible utility. No wonder the garments and mattresses of the prisoners were perpetually teeming with lice, bugs and insects. Tuberculosis and typhoid abounded. The Majdanek cure for typhus was execution by shooting. The sick people would undergo selection. Anyone capable of running before the selection committee was spared for the time being. Those who stumbled were removed for immediate killing. On rainy and stormy days, the prisoners were deliberately ordered to eat in the open. During parades, the sick and the dying were instructed to lie in the mud and snow. Jewish prisoners were brought in their tens of thousands to the gas chambers without even undergoing registration or selection. The women's hair was shorn, gold teeth extracted. Evidence was later found confirming that 9 crates of gold and valuables were dispatched to the Reich from Majdanek. The death rate in the camp was frightful. Some 180 people a day. Children died like flies. The selection procedure at the Majdanek camp was as follows. Males to the right, females to the left, children and old folk to the center. Mothers who clung to their children were separated by the lash. You will hear the evidence of a woman who obstinately refused to let go of her baby. An SS man approached her, smashed the child's head on the ground, and handed the woman the blood-soaked body with the words, "Now take your child." There were cases when babies were torn apart by the bare hands before the very eyes of the mothers who went out of their minds in horror. In Majdanek, there was only one place where the children were treated kindly. At the entrance to the gas chambers, each one was handed a sweet. To all intents and purposes, the prisoners were at the mercies of all SS men in the camp, who could kill or outrage them at will. Every Sunday, a run was held. All the prisoners were obliged to run, and anyone who lost a wooden shoe or stumbled was killed on the spot. According to the estimate of the Polish government committee, at least 200,000 Jews were destroyed at Majdanek.
The Nazi Moloch consumed more than 600,000 Jewish victims. And now to the largest and most terrible of the extermination camps, Auschwitz, the death factory for millions, which will always be remembered in the annals of humanity as the symbol of horror and infamy.
Auschwitz in Polish Oświęcim is a small townlet to the west of Krakow. It is a place impoverished by nature, an area of swamps and sand dunes, mists and dampness, fever and putrid water. It was here that this camp was established, with the sure knowledge that it was to be a slaughterhouse. The SS guards were told that they must not even rinse their mouths with unboiled water. This enormous concentration camp contained 39 branches, including auxiliary camps, Nebenlager, exterior camps, Außenlager, work camps, Arbeitslager, and branch camps, Zweiglager. At the end of 1941, Auschwitz had a capacity of 18,000 persons. In 1943, there was room for 30,000. According to the confession of the first commander of the camp, Rudolf Hels, about 2.5 million people were exterminated, and a further 500,000 died of disease, hunger, and torture. Not only Jews were brought here, there were many others whom the evil regime had resolved to afflict with forced labor and put to death. There were, for example, some thousands of Soviet prisoners of war, gypsies or opponents of the regime from other countries, amounting in all to some tens of thousands. But the Jews were brought here in their millions. Camp and feed the unfortunate victims. In the registration cards of the Jewish prisoners which have been discovered, it was recorded who sent them to Auschwitz. Department IVB4 of the RSHA. And we shall yet hear evidence that with respect to the Jews in this camp, Eichmann had complete control. The gas was delivered by a number of German firms. A few of their accounts have survived, and we shall present them to the court. In appearance, such an account looks like a normal bill of merchandise. Place of delivery, Auschwitz. Goods, 13 boxes of Zyklon B. containing 195 kilograms of cyanide gas. Cost 975 marks. 6 kilograms of this material were sufficient to exterminate 1,500 people. Every bill of this kind meant, therefore, a means of killing 42,500 persons.
Eichmann was in Auschwitz and saw what was being done there. He directed the operation and gave instructions which transports were to be sent for immediate extermination and which were to be kept for extermination later on. This was generally after the victims had written soothing postcards to Theresienstadt and other places. He also dealt with the tremendous pillage which continued right up to the gates of this hell. The plunder attained fantastic proportions. The looted diamonds were sold in Switzerland, and in Eichmann's words, influenced the whole of the Swiss market for precious stones. According to one witness, the looted valuables alone were valued at 1,000,000 marks. The giant warehouses containing the effects of those sentenced to death were given the name Canada, perhaps a corruption of the words keiner da, no one here. Hundreds were employed in them. We shall submit to your report on the delivery of these effects to Germany. During 47 days between December the 1st, 1944 and January the 1st, 1945, 99,922 sets of children's clothing, 192,652 sets of women's clothing, and 22,269 sets of men's clothing were dispatched. And after Auschwitz fell to the Red Army, there were still hundreds of thousands of sets of clothing, tens of thousands of pairs of shoes, enormous piles of shaving brushes, artificial limbs and spectacles. We shall show the pictures, you'll see it with your own eyes. The killings in Auschwitz were carried out by every method: shooting, hanging, and beating, but mainly in the massive gas chambers. In the furnaces, the bodies were burned in the open. Here too the hair was shorn, the teeth extracted and the rings removed. About 40 people were employed to handle the teeth alone. And day by day kilograms of gold were melted down, at times as much as 12 kilograms a day. At first the victims' ashes were buried in pits, but later they were thrown into the Vistula. At Auschwitz, medical experiments were made on human beings as if they were guinea pigs. Parts of female sex organs were cut out, or limbs were subjected to X-rays until the unfortunate creatures writhed in pain prior to their death. Men were castrated. Experiments were made on the influence of paraffin and petrol injections on human skin, and the effects of chemical substances on mental resistance. Associated with Auschwitz is a collection of skeletons found at Strasbourg by soldiers of the Allied forces when they entered the city in 1944. We shall prove that in response to Eichmann's order, 150 Auschwitz prisoners were supplied for death in the Natzweiler camp in Germany, so that their skeletons may be sent for anthropological research at the SS Institute of Race Research, Ann-Erbe, which had requested skulls of Jewish communist commissars. The letters have been preserved, and we shall submit them to the court. To the sound of the camp band, the slaves would go out to work and return in the evenings, exhausted, wounded, and carrying their comrades who had been killed by the guards. The methods of punishment at Auschwitz would not have shamed the most cruel barbarians in history. Beating on the naked body was a comparatively light punishment. Water was poured into people's ears, fingernails extracted, and prisoners starved until they went out of the mines. In the bunker of those sentenced for punishment by starvation, a dead prisoner was found, bent over whom was a second prisoner, also dead, grasping the lever from the corpse of the first. He had died while tearing at the liver of a fellow human being. The Nazi contribution to European culture was the reintroduction of cannibalism. The Nazi
So have you. On whose head this venomous wrath of extermination and murder fall. We shall prove that the Jewish people was bereaved of many millions, certainly close to 6 million people. But this meant more than the destruction of over a third of the total. It meant the extinction of those Jewish communities which represented the most important element in the nation from the point of view of inspiration and national consciousness, creative power, cultural and spiritual resources, devotion to the Jewish people and its values. There were some grounds for the Nazis' belief that if they could succeed in wiping out this part of Jewry, they would prove victorious in their battle against Jewry in general. From the point of view of Europe, a national community was exterminated which had resided there from the 2nd century before Christianity as an integral part of its human landscape, a nationality which Fischer, the historian, wrote in the introduction to his History of Europe. And since this was part of the landscape, and I quote Fischer, as the sunshine of religious toleration spread through Central and Western Europe, the Jews were admitted to civic rights. The hospitality of the Christian state was amply repaid in noble contributions to art, science, and literature. Unquote. Of the 257 Nobel Prize winners during the first 50 years of this century, 34 were Jews, 12 of whom were expelled by the Nazis. I shall not list here all the outstanding Jews stemming from those countries which had suffered the hand of Hitler. It will suffice if we mention just a few of the many hundreds, to gain but a partial idea of the Jewish people's contribution to European culture and life. Great geniuses like Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud, Fritz Haber, the chemist, Henry Bergson, the philosopher, Paul Ehrlich and Ilya Manshikov, biologists, Niels Bohr, psychist, Otto Warburg and Ernst Boris shine. Thinkers like Martin Buber, writers like Emil Ludwig, Stefan Zweig, Franz Kafka, Franz Werfel, Jacob Wassermann, Max Brod and Leon Feuchtwanger. The sculptors and painters like Antokolsky, Chagall, Modigliani and Max Liebermann. Max Reinhardt, the producer, musicians like Huberman, Rubinstein, Kreisler and Richard Tauber, and hundreds of others. The associations between Jewry and Germany comprises a tragic chapter in human annals. And we see that anyone who peruses Barnfeld's Book of Tears, which is an account of the persecutions that have befallen the Jewish people, will readily see that Germany was the country where Jews suffered more than in any other place. And yet, the Jewish people bestowed great love and devotion on Germany. Its folk language, Yiddish, was created on the pattern of German. It carried this tongue with it to every country of the dispersion. To Poland, Russia, and across the seas. It was in German that Herzl wrote his classics of Zionism, that the proceedings of the Zionist congresses were held, that standard works on Jewish history and philosophy were written. In other European countries, Jews also settled down and attained positions of honor. But nowhere in recent generations did they display the same devotion and enthusiasm as in Germany. Karl Marx and Ferdinand Lassalle created German socialism, which spread throughout the world. And it was their pupil
German socialism,
which spread throughout the world. And it was their pupil Edward Bernstein who founded Reformed Socialism. When World War I broke out, the German Jewish community flocked to the ranks of the German army with patriotic zeal. The aged philosopher Hermann Cohen stepped down from his university rostrum and called for a supreme effort on behalf of Germany. Fritz Haber devoted himself tirelessly to the scientific effort and invented the synthetic ammonium, which was of such assistance to the German war effort. The German Jewish community was proud of every soldier and officer awarded a medal. After the capitulation, the Jews devoted themselves to the reconstruction of the country. Walter Rathenau, first as Minister of Economic Affairs and later as Foreign Secretary, achieved much on behalf of Germany. Hugo Preuss, the Jewish Minister of the Interior, prepared the draft of the Weimar Constitution, one of the most progressive constitutions in Europe. But all this only served to fire the anger of the Nazis. Rathenau was assassinated by nationalist plotters. The Jewish contribution to Germany was represented by the Nazis as a foreign growth which had to be uprooted. And this became an accepted aim in their campaign of incitement. In terms of the Jewish people, European Jewry on the eve of the Holocaust was the heart of the whole nation, the source of its vitality. The great majority of its spiritual guides and leaders either dwelt there or were of European origin. Here were to be found the great religious scholars, the inheritors of the great Rabbi Elijah of Vilna in the renowned Volozhin Yeshiva. It was here in a suburb of Kovno that the Slobodka Yeshiva was situated, in which the Lithuanian tradition of study was maintained. It was from Europe that Rabbi Kook and the Chafetz Chaim came, that the visionaries of the state, the architects of Jewish nationalism, its leaders, thinkers and writers emerged. This was the Jewry which in the last generation gave to the nation Herzl and Nordau, Hada'am and Pinsker, Bialik, Chernychowski and Schneer, and Sholem Aleichem, Weizmann, Ben-Gurion and Jabotinsky. It was from here that the daring pioneers set forth in their quest for the promised land, the members of the first and second waves of immigration, who laid the foundations on which the state was ultimately built. From here came the dreamers and the fighters, the molders of the new Jews' way of life, thought and character. Men like A.D. Gordon, Berl Katzenelson, Kurt Blumenfeld, Shmayahu Levin, and many others whom I will not list here. These millions who were destroyed waited for their state, but were not privileged to see it. It was in these communities which were destroyed that the wonderful Jewish youth movements, imbued with national and social ideals, sprang up in the years between the wars. Their members, burning with faith, pure of body and heart, for whom Zion was their life breath. An entire civilization with a characteristic way of life, atmosphere and faith has been destroyed. Landmarks of Jewish history have been obliterated. The heart of the Jewish people has been wounded. Adolf Eichmann knew what he was about. If he should succeed in destroying this Jewry, he would destroy the whole of Jewry. The others, he hoped, would perish or be assimilated. By the mercy of Providence, which preserved a saving remnant, Adolf Eichmann's design was frustrated, and the intention that he cherished was not implemented to the end.
Adolf Eichmann's guilt lies in the planning, initiation, organization and execution of the crimes specified in the indictment. We shall prove his guilt as planner, initiator, organizer and executor of the crime known as the final solution of the Jewish problem, his direct part in the implementation of this criminal program, his role as administrator, director and commander of the operation, as well as the part he played as partner and accomplice in the implementation of the program by others. He was the pivot of the criminal conspiracy to exterminate the Jewish people, wholly or in part. And he was partner to the crimes committed by the SS, the SD, the Gestapo, including the members of the Einsatzgruppen, the security police commanders, senior SS and police officers, their emissaries and branch officers, and all those who were under their command and carried out their instructions in respect of all the acts of murder, plunder, torture, and persecution detailed in the indictment. We shall prove that the accused performed all these deeds with the set purpose of destroying the Jewish people, wholly or in part. We shall prove that his deeds were crimes against the Jewish people, crimes against humanity, and war crimes as defined in the indictment. We shall also prove the offenses committed by the accused against persons of other nationalities. In support of the charge, we shall produce extensive written and oral evidence. May I say immediately that the central archives of the Gestapo, including the archives of Eichmann's department, are not in our possession and have not as yet come to the light of day. but abundant documentary evidence is to be found in the gigantic archives of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and other ministries of the German Reich, in correspondence between the accused and his partners in crime with the ministries, in the offices of the security police and other official bureau in German cities, and in the lands conquered by the Nazis. Further, there are documents and reports which have been published by governmental institutions for the documentation and investigation of Nazi crimes, such as those in Poland, France, Holland, Denmark, and Belgium. Much material is available in the minutes of the various courts which tried Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg and in the liberated countries. Documents have also been preserved by various persons, and many of them are in our hands. We shall call witnesses who met Eichmann at the time of these acts, and others who will describe his actions and crimes as they experienced them in their own persons, and will give evidence of what they saw and heard during the period of the Holocaust. The killing of millions of Jews represented the killing off of millions of witnesses. But witnesses still survive, who can report what they saw with their own eyes, heard with their own ears, and suffered in their own persons. To the best of our ability, we shall try to demonstrate to this court in full what Adolf Eichmann did to the Jewish people. But we shall not be able to bring proof as to the fate of each community or the destruction of each Jewish population. This will remain the task of the historian. Accordingly, we shall bring before the court all the evidence at our disposal on the decisions made to carry out the extermination program, the methods by which these decisions were carried out, and the evidence as to the role and responsibility of the accused therein. We shall also submit historical evidence as to the demography of the Jewish people before the Nazis came to power, and the picture of destruction which was unfolded when the smoke of battle lifted at the end of hostilities during the Second World War. We shall also show proof of the various forms of extermination used and the methods employed by the accused to carry out this program in every place in which he operated. We shall then show the fate of a number of Jewish communities, and in the light of the extermination decision on the one hand, and the fact of the Holocaust on the other, we shall request the court to conclude that what will have been established in regard to a number of localities occurred also to the whole house of Israel in conquered Europe. It is beyond our power to give an accurate description of this terrible disaster in all its depth. I am afraid that even after submitting all the material which we have established and all the evidence in our possession, we shall not be able to do more than give a pale reflection of the enormous human and national tragedy which occurred to Jewry in this generation. Adolf Eichmann will enjoy a privilege which he did not accord to even a single one of his victims. He will be able to defend himself before the court. His fate will be decided according to law and according to the evidence, with the burden of proof resting upon the prosecution. And the judges of Israel will pronounce true and righteous judgment. Tried and escape, but German efficiency was victorious. Eichmann dealt personally with the deportations from France, and his representative went to Pierre Laval to bargain over the expulsion of the Jews. His stewards forcibly separated children from parents, the mothers holding on to their offspring and begging the butchers to leave them together. You will hear a description of these dreadful scenes. At the end, no more than 4,000 children between the ages of 2 and 14 were left. On July the 21st, 1942, Dannecker recorded the substance of Eichmann's orders with respect to these children in these words. He, Eichmann, decided that once it would be possible to renew the transports through the General Gouvernement, children's transports can get underway. Unquote. And indeed, as early as August 14, 1942, Röttger reported to the accused and informed the Auschwitz camp command that the deportation of the children had been started. Listen to a description of how these children arrived at Drancy. Quotes. The children would arrive at the Drancy camp packed in buses guarded by policemen. They would be put down in a courtyard surrounded by barbed wire, guarded by a platoon of French gendarmes. The police and the gendarmes, hard people, not easily given to emotion, could not hide their feelings and their abhorrence for the task they were compelled to carry out. On the arrival of the buses, they would begin to remove the children and lead them in groups to the halls, the older ones holding the hands of the small children or carrying them in their arms. They did not weep, these children. They walked terrified, disciplined, miserable, and complied with the orders like a flock of sheep, one helping the other. Unquote. Listen how they were deported from Drancy. Quote, on the day of deportation, they would be wakened at 5 o'clock in the morning. Irritable, half asleep. Most of the children would refuse to get up and go down to the courtyard. The volunteer women would have to urge them gently, patiently, and so tragically, so as to convince the older children that they must obey orders and vacate the halls. On a number of occasions, the entreaties did not help. The children cried and refused to leave their mattresses. The gendarme would then enter the halls, take up the children in their arms as they screamed with fear, struggling and grasping at each other. The halls were like a madhouse. The scene was too terrible for even the hardest of men to bear. In the courtyard, they would call out the names of the children one by one, mark them off in the register, and direct them to the buses. When a bus filled up, it would leave the camp with its cargo. Since many children remained unidentified and others would not answer to their correct or assumed names, they would include them in the convoy to make up the number. Each convoy consisted of 500 children and 500 adults chosen from the camp prisoners. Within a period of about 3 weeks, during the second half of August and the first part of September 1943, 4,000 children, thus made into orphans, were transported in this fashion, intermixed with adult strangers. Hauptsturmführer Röttger was present at these transports and would inspect personally the parading of the children, the roll call, and the loading into the buses. Unquote. Eichmann thought that France was backward in carrying out the deportations, and a ramified correspondence ensued. In April 1944, Department 4B4 issued an order to arrest all Jews irrespective of nationality. Eichmann ordered that informer money to be drawn from their property be paid for information leading to the apprehension of Jews in hiding.
Towns according to prepared zones marked out in advance. In a number of towns, ghettos were set up where conditions were so wretched that they defy description. To carry out the roundout in Budapest in one sweep was no easy task, as its 250,000 Jews were scattered throughout the city. It was thus found necessary to operate in stages, the houses in which Jews were ordered to live being marked with a large yellow sign. Here too, Hungarians and Jews were informed that the Jews were only wanted for work. The Hungarian government agreed to put 50,000 Jews at the disposal of the Reich for work in Germany. But the official German correspondence, all in the name of the accused, clearly indicates the true objective, Auschwitz.
The mass deportations began in the middle of May 1944. Reports exist on the different stages of the operations, the details of which were worked out by Eichmann. While negotiations marked by extortions and promises of rescue were in progress, a daily average of 12,000 were being deported. Wislizeny contacted Pinchas Freudiger, a leader of the Orthodox community, whose grandfather had been the recipient of an Austrian title of nobility and who was consequently addressed as Baron Freudiger. In return for $2 million, Wislizeny offered to rescue Jews and even received a substantial payment on account. Parallel negotiations interspersed with threats of extermination and promises of rescue were in progress between Eichmann, Kastner and Joel Brandt. Kastner was the representative of the Jewish Rescue Committee, and it was Brandt who was chosen as the emissary to bring Germany's fantastic offer, blood for goods, to the Western world. Jews were to be saved in return for trucks, coffee, tea and soap. The Jews were told that the trucks would not be used on the Western Front. Brandt, accompanied by Bandy Gross on Eichmann's orders, was instructed to travel to neutral Turkey to submit the offer to Jewish bodies. Another motive on the part of the Germans was revealed in an official report sent by Ambassador Wesenmeyer to Ribbentrop, the German foreign minister. Ribbentrop, on hearing of the suggested deal over the London radio, requested his ambassador to forward full details immediately. The latter reported that because of the shortage of certain commodities, Brandt had been dispatched with an offer that in return for these goods, in quotes, a number of Jews would be allowed to leave for Turkey, unquote. According to Ribbentrop's testimony at the Nuremberg trial, the foreign minister promptly intervened to cancel the deal, since it would be beneath German dignity to receive payment in return for stopping the extermination. Preconceived as a means to split the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. Becher was interested in extortion, Himmler in a good name. But there was one man who disapproved of the whole deal, who carried out Himmler's instructions to send Brandt to Istanbul with notable distaste, who strove with all his might to sustain the extermination and murder operations. This man was Adolf Eichmann. He started mass deportations immediately after Joel Brandt had departed. He announced that if an immediate affirmative reply was not received from Brandt, I shall let the Auschwitz mills work. And while making a pretense that the survivors would be saved if the deal succeeded, he persisted in his satanic extermination operations.
I'm opening the 9th session of the trial. We shall commence by hearing the witnesses for the prosecution. The first witness, Rav Pakat Shapir. Rav Pakat Bar Shalem. Superintendent Bar Shalem. Please step into the witness box. My colleague Gabriel Bach is going to conduct the crossword. What is your name? Naftali Bar Shalom. Superintendent, the answer yes, superintendent in the Israel Police Force. Please place your hand on the Bible and repeat after me. I swear by the Almighty God that the evidence in this trial will be true, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Are you an officer of the Israeli Police Force? Yes, I'm superintendent of the Israeli Police Force. Did you serve in the 06 office? I served in the 06 office since the 3rd of July 1960 in the capacity of head of the documentation branch number 1. Superintendent Bar Shalom, what was the nature of your task? The functions of one division were the collection of evidence and documents, their elaboration, and also their numbering, and according to pages. Could you tell the court, please, how did you deal with the documents which reached your office? When a document reached the office, it reached one particular branch, then it was selected. When the witness speaks too quickly, please apply to me, says the judge to the shorthand typist. The document then went over selection, and when we found it relevant to
Your full name, please.
My name is Avner Less.
Your rank.
Pakad, captain.
Will you cover your head and swear? I swear by God.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence in this trial will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Les, what were your duties in the police
I was working at the general staff of the Israel Police in the economic department.
Don't touch this. Do you know the accused?
Yes, I do.
When did you see him for the first time?
It was on the 29th of May, 1960, in the afternoon hours.
What were the circumstances?
I was together with Lieutenant Colonel Hafschreppel in the Ear camp when the accused was brought. This was the investigation room. This was the interrogation room, answers the witness to the judge's question.
This is a new word, remarks the judge.
Yes, in this room. When the accused was brought before us,
Who was with you?
Mr. Hofstetter.
What was Mr. Hofstetter's duty in this bureau?
He was a deputy head of the 06 office.
What happened at this meeting?
Mr. Hofstetter introduced himself to the accused. Let me say, he gave his name and the rank in the Israel police force and asked him if he remembered him. The accused answered in the affirmative. And on this occasion he was spoken to for the first time in the German language.
Do you know German?
Yes, I do master the German language.
What did Mr. Hofstetter tell the accused in your presence?
He told him that it was announced, he announced him actually, that the accused is interested and ready to give evidence with regard to his functions in the Third Reich, and he asked him whether it was true that he was ready to give the evidence in question, and the accused answered in the affirmative. He said, jawohl. And Mr. Hofstetter continued and asked him if it is clear to him that here there is no question of any kind of compulsion and constraint. Again, the accused answered in the affirmative. Whereupon Mr. Hofstetter said that I, Captain Less, should remain in the room, and he can commence with the evidence, with the testimony. And he further told him, if it is clear that the accused needs any kind of documents, he told him to apply to me in this respect, and assured him that we should make all the efforts in order to make those documents available. And afterwards Mr. Hofstetter left the room, and I remained in the room together with the accused.
This man you call the accused, is he in this court? Yes? The witness points at the accused. I wish to conduct the protocol because this pointing out must appear in the protocol. The court instructs the stenographer to write down that the witness points at the accused. What was the system of taking evidence from the accused?
The system was of recording. On the table there was a tape recorder in the very room. I said to him that I was going to record everything he said in that room in order to avoid any misunderstanding, and I asked him whether he was agreeable to that, and he answered in the affirmative. And then I turned on the tape recorder, and he commenced his testimony.
What happened later to the tape?
After the termination of after the end of the tape, I submitted it to Major Sapir, and then I marked the tape tape with my name, and I also recorded the number of the tape and also the hour at which the meeting took place. The tape was submitted to be developed.
What do you call deciphering?
The tape was submitted to the 06 workers who turned it on for themselves and heard the conversation and recorded it in shorthand, and this was typewritten later on in transcription.
In the same language?
Yes, in the same language.
What was the accused's language?
The accused spoke German.
What language did you use?
In German as well.
After the contents of this tape was typed out, what happened? The typed copy was handed to me.
I went with the transcript to the interrogation room. The accused was brought to me. I gave him the source, and before me there was a copy of the transcript. I again put on the same tape, and I let him hear the tape, and he was listened to it, and also made the necessary corrections in the transcript, which were necessary to be added as a result of misunderstanding or a word which was not clear. And up to the end of the tape, he was correcting the transcript in his own handwriting, checking upon the correctness of the transcript, initialing each page, and I signed also at the end of the last page, and I also initialed each page apart.
Can you tell us of stages during this examination? What came first?
At the beginning, he gave his life sketch in a current manner, almost without my intervening at all. I hardly ever asked a question. Just here and there I asked some questions with regard to one point or two. This was the first stage.
What was the following stage?
The second stage consisted in another phase when he read to one of the tapes. I believe this was tape number 8. Then he made a declaration which he read from a paper on which there was some written note, and
he read out of the paper a written declaration prepared by him, so that this declaration is in your hand, in his own handwriting, and is also on the tape?
Yes, this is on tape, and the transcript had been submitted to me.
And afterwards, what happened?
Then he was examined by Mr. Hofstetter, and this again was recorded. And he expressed his readiness to continue in his testimony, and certain documents were submitted to him by myself, and in connection with these documents I asked certain questions.
Was there any material prepared by the accused regarding certain incidents? What kind of material?
These were the written notes which had been prepared by Eichmann in accordance with those points which were recorded, he made his testimony. There were declarations which he read into the tape recorder. And there were records which he did not register, but which he prepared at my request. This was a document
Locations.
of locations which are customary in the German Reich. This was a technical question with regard to the signing of letters in Germany, in Auftrage, as it is called, or in during the discharge of duties. He also gave 107 pages of his memoirs, and there were other records as well.
With the permission, by permission of court, I request that we adjourn so that we are able to bring all the documents Mr. Less has to submit. And this will be more convenient. The court thanks the witness. You will continue tomorrow morning. We shall adjourn and continue tomorrow at 9.
לא, הוא יהיו להכניס את הכל לתוך הרזרב.